Hey you, how goes it? So, I got a question. Is there a friend that you haven't seen in a while? Someone you've just been itching to visit, but haven't? Think about them for a sec. Now imagine they live about 3 hours away. Walking. Sorry, no cars. But the walk there, it's amazing. Just green pastures of grazing sheep as the bright sun beats down. The salt of the sea hitting your nose as you pass by a sea cave, making your way over a bend, and some stinky fish. Woo! The cool shade of the sparse forest relaxing you as you slowly saunter by. You finally make it there, and it's well worth the effort. The hours melt away as you catch up. The conversation bouncing back and forth like an old song you remember all the words to. It's just like old times. And before you know it, the sun begins to set and you realize you need to head home. It's hard to go, but you say your heavy-teared goodbyes and head back. The crickets chirp their song as you pass through the forest. You take in the awe of the sea as it dashes against the rocks. But as you make the bend, something catches your eye. Lying there on the ground is a little girl. She looked a bit dirty and disheveled and wasn't moving. You run to check on her. You let go a sigh of relief when she's breathing. Less relieved when she opens her eyes and smiles as the light fades from your eyes. Everything goes black. You wake up, your head is pounding, and your vision blurred. A small amount of light illuminates the area as everything starts to come into focus. And soon you would be wishing it had not. You were inside the cave that you had passed by. You didn't expect anything to be living here. Whatever it is, it's hungry. Body parts were strewn across the cave, some half-eaten, all of them human. It wasn't fish that you smelled before, but the rotting stench of human flesh. That's when you notice the pot and the sickeningly succulent smell wafting from it. That's when you see the family sitting around the fire. That's when you also realize what's about to happen to you. The light casting the shadows of the monsters inside each of them. A man with moppish brown hair and a scraggly beard creeps towards you, the leer of his smile chilling you to the bone. The glint of the axe he was carrying would bounce off the firelight. You see the blood still crusted on it as it fills your vision. It would strike your head repeatedly as your host thanks you for coming to dinner. And I know it's sad you both had to separate so soon, but don't worry, he'll be carrying around a piece of your heart with him forever. At least, for the next digestive period. This is something that could have unfortunately happened to you if you had lived in East Lothian, Scotland in the 16th century. During this time, there existed a historical figure drenched in folklore known as Sawney Bean, a leader of an incestual cannibal clan similar to those found in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, eating those they robbed while others would find the parts washed ashore. Today we'll go over Sawney Bean's tale and how accurate historians have found his grisly life. I'll also talk more about those familial flesh eaters we know and love and the cannibal craze that lends itself to horror. Now come with me and delve into the shadows. Alexander Sawney Bean was born in East Lothian just outside of Edinburgh, Scotland in 16th century. His father engaged in hard work to provide for the family by digging ditches and trimming hedges. Bean tried to follow in his father's footsteps, but quickly realized he wasn't cut out for it. Hard work just wasn't for him. He'd much rather run around and be a little something he and his wife would connect over. Bean would work long enough until he was able to run off with her. She had been known around town as Black Agnes Douglas, with many murmurs of her being a witch. I can tell you, with what's about to follow, definitely a real witch. She and Bean would make their way up the coast of Galloway, leaving a trail of bodies, robbing and eating the people that they would happen upon. It was here where they would find their home sweet home, a cave in the side of the cliff that had an entrance that would be hidden during the high tide, helping obscure the family for the next 25 years and lending to their wraith-like status. And I might have spoken too soon when I said that Bean didn't enjoy work. There were two kinds of work that he particularly enjoyed. One would be hopping the ride to the procreation station. During the time in the cave, the couple would have 6 daughters and 8 sons, those going on to produce 14 granddaughters and 18 grandsons. The grandchildren all being said to be born of incest, which I'm guessing there's not really a lot to do in a cave, besides, you know, your sister.
Oh, God. That's not funny.
The other work that he enjoyed was robbing, the main way the family would provide for each other. They would lay in wait until nighttime and then ambush unsuspecting travelers under the guise of darkness. The victims would be robbed and murdered and dragged off to the nearby cave. It was here where they would be quartered and eaten. Barrels would line the walls of the cave filled with pickled leftover parts. The contents of these barrels would sometimes be discarded into the sea, washing ashore for some unlucky passerby. I cannot imagine just walking along the beach, enjoying the sun, and then catching the sight of a human foot. That.
Sir, need you to move your foot. Thank you.
Discarding these parts actually ended up favoring the family. The savagery in which the parts were dismembered, and the way in which they randomly washed up, it appeared vicious animals were carrying out the attacks, eating until they had their fill and then letting the rest wash away. They weren't too far off. The people eventually noticed all of the missing bodies, and some went to investigate, but they found very little. Most didn't think anything could be living in the cave. It was massive, going a mile underground. This would cause the people to react in terror and hang innocent travelers they suspected of the murders. Even worse, they would also carry out their vigilante justice on innocent innkeepers, all based on the fact that they were the last ones to see the victim alive. It was a frenzy of the masses that would leave even less dens of safety for the weary traveler. This would go on for 25 years before the Bean clan picked the wrong victim. A young couple who had been having a good time at the fair was riding their horse home when the brigands jumped the couple. The man would fight off the clan with the sword and pistol that he had in hand, a trained combatant, and fight he did. The family members would have a hard time getting in on the couple, but eventually they surrounded the horse, managing to topple the woman off. She would fall to the ground and be rushed by the entire clan. They would split her throat and start drinking in the blood while tearing the entrails from her belly, bringing up the imagery of bloodthirsty zombies. It looked like that this would also be the man's fate when 20 or 30 fairgoers came upon the scene. This spooked the Beans and they fled back to their cave. The man knew he had to tell the authorities. They'd never believe a cannibal family was hiding out in a cave. He told the local magistrate, who then passed it along to the king. The king wasn't having any of it. He rounded up a posse of 400 men and some dogs to lead the hunt. The bloodhounds were able to catch the scent, and before you know it, the posse was standing in front of the ominous cave. They were not prepared for what they were about to see. They followed the dogs into the darkness, asking how anyone could live there. The dogs would bark and continue further in, refusing to return to their masters. The men lit their torches and went deeper, only stopping when they reached the room this family of monsters was staying in. Their legs would start to give way, and their hands shake. The bodies of their victims had been strung up like jerky. Many more lay inside barrels, slowly pickling, and around those parts were heaps of gold jewelry and clothing. All of those struck down by the callous cannibals. But in the end, the clan would get their just desserts. There are two versions of what happened to the Bean family. The simplest one involved the king and his men detonating the entrance to the cave with gunpowder, cutting off all hope of escape for those inside, leading them to eventually suffocate. The other version has the king finding the clan inside the cave. They would be led in chains with their mounds of stolen goods back to the Tolbooth jail in Edinburgh. They would be transferred off to be executed, foregoing the trial altogether. I mean, you don't hold a trial for animals. The men would be dispatched brutally by having their hands, feet, and genitals severed. They would then be left to slowly bleed out. The women have a slightly less, but still horrible end. 3 pyres would be made and the women tied to stakes. The pyres would then be lit, setting them ablaze. Sawney Bean would shout one last phrase before he bled out, yelling, "It isn't over. It's never over." He couldn't be more wrong, because this was the end of his tale. And even though they lived through their infamy, the clan is still deader than dead. Some historians question whether they have existed at all. One of those is Sean Thomas. He found that a witch expert known as Ronald Holmes traced the earliest publication of this story to the Carlisle in 1700. It was a pamphlet that favored more gory or heroic lace stories. This was simple. It's because it sold the best. Looks like we're still here, with YouTube drama channels becoming the new tabloids. With it being so popular, it was reprinted over and over again. Holmes also mentioned that the prison where the Bean clan was kept was in no state for prisoners and was 50 miles down the road. Highly unlikely they walked that far. There are no records of it either, not of Sawney Bean's execution, nor the hundreds of killings that occurred on the roadside. The king was meticulous over records, paranoid over demons and witchcraft. Something should be there, or in the journals of those living around the cave. But no one mentions it. Sawney's parents are noted as digging through the ditches. Sorry, I just had to. That occupation wouldn't be common in Scotland around the time. And speaking of time, it's all over the place for this story, with each iteration seemingly dating it at a different time period, but none of it matching the details. So I know you're asking yourself, why would someone make up a story like this, painting it as fact? The same reason that Bridget Cleary's story got blown up. Propaganda. There had been the Jacobite Rebellion, and England wasn't feeling too good about Scotland. With Galloway being known as a lawless place, it could help reinforce some bad stereotypes. But Sean Thomas mentions that the English are painted with the same broad strokes in that same publication, making the English look like pirates and brigands. So then what is the most likely reason for this existing? It's the same reason that you're probably watching this video. Morbid curiosity. I wanted to do this episode as soon as I saw what the topic was about. There's something I love about the crazy backwoods cannibal family stereotype, and I thought it was because I grew up in a redneck family, but it looks like I'm not the only one. I mean, this inspired two little horror movies you might have heard of: The Hills Have Eyes and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Maybe it's that perversion of family, engaging in taboos not to fall apart, but instead work as a cohesive unit. It constantly makes my brain go, why the f would they do that? And then go, fascinating. Wrong Turn was always a go-to for me at my Blockbuster, and I'm definitely dating myself on that one. And it seems like those picking up the Penny Dreadfuls would have loved it too. It's also easy to see how we get tales of werewolves chowing down on some flesh, or vampires drinking blood, when the tales of cannibal families are being sold as fact. So yeah, the most likely scenario is the one we already knew. We love watching messy bitches, giving a similar response when I do this. There have also been studies linking that same rush of fear to a burst of happiness. It's all about keeping yourself entertained while your brain hits that joy buzzer. But isn't that what we're all doing? Anyways, hope this video hits a few for you. I want to thank you again for delving into the shadows of me. Goodbye. I keep it lubricated.